High in the weathered peaks of the Carpathian Mountains, an aging shepherd named Mircea tends his flock as his ancestors did for generations before him. During a violent spring storm, a sudden rockslide leaves him gravely wounded. Instead of calling for immediate rescue, he uses his remaining strength to guide the search party to something far more important, a hidden cave entrance he discovered months ago but kept secret. Inside lies an underground spring, feeding an ancient settlement untouched for millennia. The pristine artifacts and mysterious manuscripts they uncover don't just reshape local history, they challenge everything we thought we knew about Early's European civilization. What powerful secret could make a dying man risk his last moments to protect something he never truly owned? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wooden staff made a familiar tap against the rocky soil as Mircea guided his sheep along the ancient pathway. His weathered hands gripped the smooth, worn handle, fingers tracing the generations of notches carved by his ancestors, each mark a story, each groove a memory. At 73, he knew every dip and rise of these mountain paths as intimately as the lines on his face. Dawn painted the Carpathian peaks in shades of amber and rose, the morning mist clinging to the valleys below like a mother's embrace. Mircea paused to catch his breath, leaning on the staff that had been passed down through 5 generations of shepherds. His father's mark, a simple cross with a curved line beneath it, sat just below his own, a continuous chain of guardianship, stretching back to times when these mountains held different names. His dog, Loop, circled the flock with practiced ease, responding to whistles so subtle that even the younger shepherds couldn't hear them. These weren't just signals. They were a language as old as the hills themselves, passed down through centuries of necessity and survival. The village of Izvorul Mureșului lay nestled in the valley below, its morning smoke rising from chimneys, like thin prayers to the sky. Mircea remembered when every house held a family he knew by name, when the evening air rang with children's laughter and the bleating of sheep returning home. Now half the houses stood empty, their windows dark like vacant eyes staring at nothing. His granddaughter Elena's voice echoed in his mind. "The world is changing, Bunik. We can't live in the past forever." She was studying archaeology at the university in Cluj, filling her head with new ideas about the old world. But she couldn't understand, that some things were meant to remain unchanged, untouched by the rushing current of progress. Mircea's hand brushed against the ram's horn slung across his chest, another inheritance from his father. Its surface was smooth from generations of hands, its curve telling stories of warnings echoed across these valleys. 3 long blasts meant wolves, 2 sharp ones, a lost sheep. 1 prolonged cry, help needed. The horn's call could reach ears beyond the sight of eyes, carrying messages that no modern device could replicate with quite the same urgency, the same soul. The flock moved ahead, their bells creating a symphony that had accompanied his days since childhood. Each sheep had its own tone, its own rhythm, a music that told him of their health and mood without needing to look. A slight limp would change the cadence, fear would quicken it, contentment would steady it to a gentle lullaby. As the morning aged, Mircea guided his flock toward the high pastures, where the sweetest grass grew in patches between the rocks. The air was different up here, cleaner, older somehow. Here, among the ancient stones and hardy mountain flowers, time moved differently. The modern world, with its constant noise and endless hurry, felt like a distant dream. But even here, change crept in like morning frost. New markers appeared on trees, bright orange strips marking boundaries for some developers' dreams. Survey. Teams with their electronic instruments passed through occasionally, measuring and marking, speaking of progress and opportunity. They saw empty mountains, unused land, They couldn't see the centuries of life, of death, of struggle and survival written in every rock and blade of grass, and they couldn't see what Mircea had found, what he protected with his silence. The thought of it made his heart beat faster. Even now, some discoveries were better left in darkness, preserved in silence, until the right moment came, if it ever came. 3 months earlier, winter had begun its slow retreat from the mountains. Mircea had been following a strayed lamb when he found it, a dark crack in the mountainside, barely visible behind a curtain of melting ice. He might have missed it entirely if not for the warm air that whispered from its depths, melting the surrounding frost in delicate patterns. The lamb had wandered in, its bleats echoing strangely. Mircea followed, his old flashlight casting yellow beams into darkness that seemed to swallow light whole. The passage twisted like a wound in the mountain's flesh, leading him deeper than he'd ever ventured in his 7 decades of roaming these peaks. Then the passage opened, and Mircea's world changed forever. His light caught something that shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there. A piece of clay, perfectly preserved, bearing markings he'd never seen before. Not Romanian, not Hungarian, not even the Church Slavonic he remembered from his grandfather's ancient prayer books. These were older, more primitive, yet somehow more precise, like the mountain itself had learned to write. He picked up the fragment with trembling hands. In the beam of his flashlight, other shapes emerged from the darkness, walls that couldn't be natural, surfaces too smooth, too intentional, steps carved into stone, leading down to what looked like a doorway, its frame still intact after unknown millennia. That night, sleep eluded him. The fragment sat on his bedside table, its unknown script seeming to shift in the candlelight. He should tell someone. Elena would know what to do. Her professors would be interested. But something held him back, a feeling as old as the mountains themselves. Some discoveries needed time to ripen, like fruit on the vine. Release them too soon, and their sweetness would be lost forever. The next morning, Elena called. "Bunik, guess what? That developer, Victor Antonescu, he's submitted plans for the ski resort. They're talking about cable cars, hotels, restaurants, right in your grazing lands." Mircea's heart tightened. He looked at the clay fragment, its ancient markings now seeming like a warning. "These things take time, Elena. The mountains have their own ways." "That's just it, Bunik. Times are changing. The village needs this. Young people are leaving because there's no work. Even the sheep farming, it's not enough anymore." He heard the hesitation in her voice, the gentle attempt to bridge 2 worlds. Elena understood the old ways better than most of her generation. Her summers spent in the mountains with him had left their mark. But she also saw what he couldn't or wouldn't. A dying village, empty houses, a future slipping away like water through cupped hands. "Come visit soon," he said finally. "The mountains miss you." "I will, Bunik. My professor's interested in doing a survey of the area before the development starts, looking for historical sites, you know. Maybe I can come with his team." Historical sites. Mircea's eyes drifted to the fragment again. Its markings seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, like a heart beating beneath stone. "Not yet," he thought. "Not until I understand what we're dealing with." Later that week, he returned to the cave, this time with proper supplies. Each visit revealed more wonders, more questions. A complete tablet emerged from the rubble, its surface cracked, but its message intact, whatever that message might be. Tools made of metal that hadn't corroded despite the centuries. And always, that sense of purpose in the construction, of knowledge in the craftsmanship that went beyond anything he'd expected to find. But with each discovery came new signs of the modern world's encroachment. Survey markers appeared on trees, ever closer to the cave entrance. Helicopters buzzed overhead, carrying men with cameras and instruments. Time was running out, like sand through an hourglass. One evening, as shadows lengthened across the valley, Mircea sat in his small kitchen, the artifacts arranged before him like silent witnesses to an age long past. His father's voice echoed. In his memory, We don't own these mountains, son. We're their guardians, nothing more. Every shepherd before us knew this truth. He covered the artifacts carefully, hiding them away in an old chest. Outside, a spring storm was building, dark clouds gathering above the peaks like a council of giants. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would begin documenting everything, creating a record that Elena would understand. But for tonight, the mountains. Secrets would remain as they had for thousands of years, silent, sacred, and safe. In his small wooden cabinet, beneath decades of shepherding records and faded photographs, Mircea kept something his grandfather had given him long ago, a piece of crudely drawn parchment, its edges crumbling with age. Local shepherds had passed it down through generations, marking the locations of shelters, dangerous passes, and sacred places in the mountains. But in the corner, almost as an afterthought, was a series of marks he'd never understood until now. They matched perfectly with the cave's location. The morning light streamed through his window as he spread the old map on his kitchen table, his coffee growing cold beside it. The marks weren't just random scratches, as he'd always assumed. They formed a crude network, spreading from the cave's location like veins in a leaf. Underground passages, ancient paths. The possibilities made his hands tremble. A knock at his door startled him. Victor Antonescu stood on his doorstep, impeccable in his city clothes despite the early hour. The developer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mircea, my friend, I hope I'm not disturbing your morning." "Victor." Mircea nodded, keeping his door half closed. "What brings a businessman to visit an old shepherd so early?" "Good news. The preliminary surveys are complete. I wanted you to be among the first to know. The resort project is moving forward. We'll begin marking the construction zones next week." Mircea's throat tightened. "The grazing permits will be honored until the end of the season, of course. We respect tradition, Mircea, but progress must come to these mountains eventually. Surely you see that." Behind Victor, two men in survey gear were setting up equipment near the tree line. Their orange markers seemed to mock the ancient blazes shepherds had used for centuries to mark their paths. "These mountains have their own laws, Victor. Their own secrets. Not everything here welcomes change." Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Interesting choice of words. Some of my survey team mentioned seeing you in unusual places lately. Areas far from your usual grazing routes." A chill ran down Mircea's spine, but he kept his face neutral. "An old shepherd knows every path in his mountains, even ones your maps don't show." Of course. Victor paused, studying him. "You know, there are local legends about these peaks, hidden places, ancient things. My researchers have been quite fascinated by them. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" "Old wives' tales," Mircea said carefully. "Stories to keep children from wandering too far." "Perhaps. Though sometimes, Mircea, tales have a way of being more true than we think. If anyone were to find something of historical significance, they would be legally obligated to report it. The penalties for failing to do so can be quite severe." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as mountain water. Mircea thought of the cave, of the artifacts hidden in his home, of the ancient map showing paths that shouldn't exist. "I'm just a shepherd, Victor. The only history I know is in these." He held up his calloused hands. "If you're looking for stories, try the village elders." Victor nodded, but his eyes were sharp. "Well, if you do hear anything interesting, my office is always open. Progress and preservation can work together, Mircea, for the right price." After Victor left, Mircea sat heavily at his table, staring at the ancient map. The marked passages seemed to whisper to him, hinting at depths and secrets he was only beginning to understand. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "The mountains keep their own counsel, boy. Some secrets they share only with those who know how to listen." He carefully folded the map and returned it to its hiding place. Outside, the survey team's equipment blinked and whirred, measuring, calculating, reducing the ancient mountains to numbers and charts. But they couldn't measure what really mattered. the weight of history, the depth of tradition, the responsibility of keeping ancient truths safe from modern greed. That night, Mircea lit a candle and added his own marks to the old map, carefully documenting what he'd found in the cave. Future shepherds would need to know, would need to understand what lay beneath their feet. Whether that future included ski lifts and hotels or remained as wild as it had been for millennia, some knowledge couldn't be lost. The candle flame flickered, casting his shadow large against the wall. Tomorrow he would return to the cave. There was more to document, more to understand. Time was running out, but the mountains had taught him patience. The right moment would come. He had to believe that. The storm came without warning, the way spring storms often do in the Carpathians. One moment, Mircea was making his final notes in the leather-bound journal he'd started keeping since the discovery, sketching the latest artifacts, marking their locations in the cave system. The next, the mountain air turned electric, heavy with the promise of violence. He'd been documenting a series of unusual markings near the cave entrance, symbols that seemed to repeat in a pattern he was only beginning to understand. His journal pages were filled with careful drawings, measurements and observations, each entry dated and cross-referenced with the old shepherd's map. Today's discovery had been particularly exciting, a series of glyphs that appeared to describe water flows and lunar cycles. The first droplet struck his face as he finished the sketch. Looking up, he saw darkness rolling over the peaks like an avalanche of shadow. His sheep were already moving, bunching together instinctively, their bells creating an urgent symphony. Loop circled them nervously, responding to something more than just the approaching storm. "Time to go home," Mircea murmured, tucking the journal into his weatherproof bag. But even as he spoke, a deep rumble shook the ground. Not thunder, this came from within the mountain itself, a sound he'd learned to fear over his decades in these heights. The first rocks came down as he was securing the cave entrance. Small ones at first, bouncing and skittering past like deadly hail, then larger ones, gathering momentum as they fell. Mircea worked faster, his old hands trembling as he replaced the brush and stones that kept the entrance hidden. He couldn't leave it exposed, not with Victor's surveyors everywhere these days. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the mountainside in stark relief. In that frozen moment of brilliance, Mircea saw what was coming. A massive section of the slope above had broken loose, tons of rock and earth now moving as one. He ran. There was nothing else to do. 7 decades of mountain life had taught him that much. When the mountain moves, you move with it, or you die. But the years had taken their toll. His legs, once sure as a mountain goat's, betrayed him. A rock struck his shoulder, spinning him around. Another caught his leg as he fell. The world became chaos. Rock and earth and sky tumbled together in a deadly dance. Mircea rolled, trying to protect his head, trying to remember everything his father had taught him about surviving the mountain's rages. Something struck his side, hard. Pain exploded through his chest. Then darkness. He awoke to Loop's whining and the taste of blood in his mouth. The storm still raged, but its fury had moved on, leaving behind a steady, soaking rain. Every breath was fire in his chest. His right leg wouldn't move at all. The journal had survived in his bag, protected by the thick leather. With trembling hands, Mircea pulled it out along with the old shepherd's horn. 3 long blasts for danger, that was the ancient code. But as he raised the horn to his lips, he hesitated. A rescue party would come. Yes, but they would find more than just an injured shepherd. The cave entrance was still partially visible, its secrets exposed by the rockslide. Once found, it would become public knowledge. Victor would claim it for his development. The artifacts would be scattered to museums, their true significance lost in academic debates and tourist attractions, unless, with painful slowness, Mircea opened his journal to a blank page. His pencil shook as he wrote, but the words came clearly. To whoever finds this, I, Mircea Vasile, of sound mind, though broken body, declare this site to be of profound historical significance. What lies within that cave is not mine to give away, nor any man's to claim. It belongs to history itself, to our people, to the future. I've documented everything I found in these pages, not as its owner, but as its witness. He added details about the artifacts, the symbols, the underground passages shown on the old map. Then, most importantly, he wrote of his conversations with Victor, the threats, the plans for development. Finally, he wrote of Elena, her studies, her understanding of both the old ways and the new. Let my granddaughter Elena Vasile be consulted in all matters regarding this discovery. She alone bridges the world of our ancestors and the world to come. Lightning flashed again, closer now. The rain had soaked through his clothes, chilling him to the bone. His injuries screamed for attention. It was time. Mircea raised the horn to his lips and blew, not 3 blasts for danger, but the ancient call used to summon the village to witness something momentous. 5 long notes, rising and falling like the mountain wind itself. In the valley below, dogs began to bark. Lights appeared in windows. He blew again, pouring the last of his strength into the signal. Then, cradling the journal to his chest, Mircea waited. The pain was distant now, replaced by a strange peace. He had done what needed to be done. The mountain's secrets would emerge, yes, but on their own terms, through proper hands. The first shouts reached him just as consciousness began to fade. Flashlight beams cut through the rain. Loop barked, guiding the rescuers to his location. "Here," he heard someone call. "The old shepherd's up here." Mircea clutched the journal tighter. "The cave," he whispered, as hands reached for him. "You must see what I found." The last thing he saw before darkness took him was his journal being carefully taken from his hands, its pages heavy with the weight of history yet to be revealed. Elena's hands trembled as she held the bronze tools, their surfaces untarnished by time. In the harsh light of the emergency medical tent, where her grandfather lay sedated but stable, these ancient implements seemed to pulse with their own inner life. The rescue team had found them in his bag, wrapped carefully in wool cloth, along with his meticulously documented journal. "Perfect preservation," Dr. Popescu murmured, examining another tool through his magnifying glass. "The alloy composition appears unprecedented for this region and era." The professor had dropped everything and driven through the night when Eleanor called, arriving just as dawn broke over the mountain. Outside, a growing crowd of villagers, reporters, and local officials milled about, drawn by the news of Mircea's accident and the subsequent discovery. The tools sat between them like a bridge across millennia, hammer, chisel, and something that resembled a compass, but with markings unlike anything Elena had seen in her studies. "Your grandfather's notes are remarkable," Popescu continued, turning a page in the journal. "Look at these sketches, the detail, the precision. He may not be a trained archaeologist, but he has a shepherd's eye for observation." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shaking. The past 12 hours felt like a dream. The frantic drive from Cluj, the sight of her grandfather being carried down the mountain, the growing reality of what he had discovered. He knew exactly what he was doing, didn't he? Waiting until now to reveal it? Popescu nodded gravely. The development plans would have destroyed everything. Construction crews, excavators, they would have ripped through those caves without a second thought. Your grandfather chose the perfect moment. Now, with these artifacts and his documentation, we can secure emergency heritage protection status. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the tent's opening, Elena saw Victor Antonescu arriving with a team of lawyers, and what appeared to be private security. The developer's face was thunderous. "Dr. Popescu," Elena said quietly, "there's something else you need to see." She reached into her grandfather's bag and pulled out the old shepherd's map. He marked everything on this, the cave system, the artifacts' locations. even some passages that haven't been explored yet. The professor's eyes widened as he studied the ancient parchment. This is extraordinary. These markings, they suggest the cave system is far more extensive than what's currently visible. And look at these symbols in the margins. They're similar to what we found at the Tertaria site, but more complex. A shadow appeared at the tent's entrance. One of Victor's lawyers, a sleek woman in an expensive suit, cleared her throat. Ms. Vasile? Mr. Antonescu would like to discuss the situation. Given that the discovery was made on land already contracted for development, my grandfather is still unconscious. Elena cut her off, standing protectively over the artifacts. Any discussions about the site's future will have to wait until he recovers. Of course, the lawyer smiled thinly, but you should know that our contract includes mineral and archaeological rights. Any discoveries made are now under emergency heritage protection, Popescu interrupted, holding up his phone. The Ministry of Culture just confirmed it. No development can proceed until a full archaeological survey is completed. The lawyer's smile vanished. Outside, Victor was already on his phone, gesturing angrily. Elena turned back to the bronze tools, their surfaces reflecting the morning light that filtered through the tent. Each tool told a story, of craftsmanship, of purpose, of a civilization, advanced enough to create implements that would survive millennia. But they also posed questions. Who were these people? What else lay hidden in those mountain passages? And most importantly, what had her grandfather seen down there that made him risk everything to protect it? A soft groan from the medical bed drew her attention. Mircea was stirring, his eyes flickering beneath their lids. Elena took his hand, feeling the calluses earned through decades of mountain life. "Rest, Bunich," she whispered. "You've done your part. Now it's my turn to protect what you found." The tools gleamed in their makeshift display, silent witnesses to a moment of transition. Outside, the future approached in the form of officials, reporters, and competing interests. But here, in this quiet tent, the past and present merged in the touch of two hands, one aged by a lifetime of keeping secrets, the other young and ready to reveal them to the world. The cave's entrance had been secured with temporary scaffolding, transforming Mircea's hidden sanctuary into a proper archaeological site. Elena stood at the threshold, watching as the first team of specialists set up their equipment. Their powerful lights cut through the darkness, revealing details her grandfather had documented so carefully in his journal. "Ready?" Dr. Popescu asked, handing her a professional-grade headlamp. The morning sun hadn't yet reached the mountainside, and their breath formed small clouds in the cool air. Behind them, graduate students carefully unpacked ground-penetrating radar equipment. Before Elena could answer, a commotion erupted at the site's perimeter. Victor's security team was arguing with the police officers stationed to protect the site. Through the pre-dawn gloom, she saw the developer himself standing by his luxury SUV, watching the scene unfold with calculated patience. "We should hurry," Elena said, adjusting her headlamp. "The Heritage Protection Order won't hold him off forever." The cave air wrapped around them like a living thing as they entered, carrying scents of mineral and age. Their lights revealed the careful stonework her grandfather had described, too precise to be natural, too ancient to be recent. Elena touched the wall, feeling the subtle patterns carved into the rock. "Look at this," Popescu called from ahead. "The construction method, it's unlike anything we've seen from this period." His light traced the joining of two stone blocks, fitted so perfectly that not even a blade of grass could pass between them. They moved deeper, following the path marked in Mircea's journal. The main chamber opened before them, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above. Here, the signs of ancient habitation were unmistakable. Niches carved into walls, platforms that might have been workbenches, and channels that suggested some sort of water management system. There, Elena pointed to an alcove her grandfather had marked with special care in his notes. He wrote that this area felt different, colder than the rest, As they approached, their lights caught something that made both archaeologists stop short. Set into the wall was what appeared to be a door, not crude or primitive, but engineered with precision, and in its center, a cylindrical protrusion that could only be described as a lock mechanism. Impossible, Popescu breathed. This level of metallurgy at this date. Elena's hands shook as she photographed the door. The metal components showed virtually no corrosion, as if they'd been sealed in some way against time itself. But it was what lay at the door's base that caught her trained eye, a scroll case, half buried in centuries of sediment. Its bronze surface bearing the same intricate patterns as the door above. With careful movements taught through years of training, Elena documented the case's position before beginning the delicate process of extraction. The case's weight surprised her. It was lighter than it should be, given its size and apparent material. The threads are still intact, she marveled, examining the cap. It's been sealed all this time. A distant rumble made them both look up. Not thunder, explosives. The sound of construction work beginning, despite the protection order. Victor's not waiting, Elena said grimly, securing the scroll case in her conservation bag. He's starting work on the access road. He can't reach the cave without... Popescu began, but another explosion cut him off, this one closer. Dust drifted down from above. Elena's phone buzzed, a message from one of the security guards. They're claiming the roadwork was approved before the heritage order. They're going to say any damage to the site is accidental. The implications were clear. Even with legal protection, the site was vulnerable. One accident with heavy machinery, an unfortunate cave-in, and centuries of history could be lost forever. They hurried back toward the entrance, Elena clutching the scroll case like a lifeline. Her grandfather had understood this would happen. It's why he'd waited, watched, documented everything so carefully before revealing the truth. The cave wasn't just a historical site. It was a battleground between preservation and profit. In the growing morning light, Eleanor saw more of Victor's equipment arriving. Bulldozers, excavators, drill rigs. The developer caught her eye across the distance and raised his coffee cup in a mock salute. But Elena held something that might change everything. The scroll case felt warm against her side, its secrets waiting to be revealed after countless centuries of darkness. Whatever message it contained, whatever knowledge it preserved, she would make sure it saw the light of day, not as a tourist attraction or a corporate trophy, but as her grandfather had intended, a testament to a civilization that had understood things worth preserving. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and the scratch of Elena's pen as she sketched the ceremonial vessel they'd discovered that morning. Mircea watched her work from his bed, his weathered face pale but alert. The vessel sat between them on a sterile medical tray, its polished surface catching the afternoon light. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Elena said, detailing the intricate spiral patterns that wrapped around the vessel's neck. "The metallurgy is unlike anything we've seen from this period. The alloy contains elements that shouldn't have been available to ancient craftsmen." Mircea nodded slowly. "I found it near the water channel. The way it was positioned, it wasn't abandoned or lost. It was placed there deliberately. The vessel's design defied conventional archaeology. Its surface bore no tarnish, its joints showed no wear. Most remarkably, it contained a complex mechanism of interlocking rings that could be rotated to align different symbols, a combination lock that had survived millennia. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Dr. Popescu entered, his face grave. "The ministry team has arrived, and they're not alone." Elena set down her sketchbook. "Victor, his archaeological contractors. They're claiming right of first discovery since the cave is on land contracted for development. They've also brought in private security, former military by the look of them." Mircea attempted to sit up, wincing. "The journal is safe," Elena assured him. "I've submitted it as evidence of prior discovery, But Victor's lawyers are arguing that as an untrained observer, your documentation doesn't meet professional standards. Standards. Mircea's voice rose. I've lived on those mountains for 73 years. My father lived there before me, and his father before him. We've been documenting these peaks since before their lawyers' grandparents were born. Another knock, more insistent this time. A government official entered, followed by two men in expensive suits. Elena recognized one as Victor's chief legal counsel. Ms. Vasily, the official began, in light of the competing claims, we're establishing a joint oversight committee. Until ownership can be legally determined, all artifacts must be transferred to the National Museum for safekeeping. Eleanor's hand moved protectively toward the ceremonial vessel. This piece is still undergoing initial documentation. The conservation process can be handled by museum staff. Victor's lawyer interrupted smoothly. We have concerns about proper handling protocols in a hospital environment. The vessel seemed to pulse in the afternoon light, its mysterious mechanisms holding secrets that couldn't be entrusted to bureaucratic custody. Elena thought of the scroll case, safely hidden in Dr. Popescu's university lab, its contents not yet revealed. There's something you need to understand, she said, standing. These artifacts aren't just historical curiosities. The technology, they represent the knowledge they contain. It's beyond anything we thought possible for their age. They need to be studied in context, not locked away in museum storage. All the more reason for proper institutional oversight, the official replied. We can't risk amateur handlers, no matter how well-intentioned. Mircea's monitor beeped more rapidly. Amateur? His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of generations. Show me one among you who can read the weather in a sheep's movement, who knows every spring and cave in those mountains, who understands the difference between land that's empty and land that's waiting to reveal its secrets. The official shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Vasily, your contribution is noted, but nothing, Eleanor cut in. My grandfather didn't just find these artifacts. He protected them, documented them, understood their relationship to the land itself. This vessel isn't just a museum piece. It's part of a larger story that's still unfolding. She lifted the vessel carefully, letting its mysterious mechanisms catch the light. Look at the craftsmanship, the precision. This wasn't created to sit behind glass. It was made to be used, to work in concert with something else in that cave. System, something we haven't found yet. The lawyer stepped forward. All the more reason for professional oversight. A commotion in the hallway interrupted him. Dr. Popescu burst in, out of breath. Elena, you need to see this. The scroll case. We've managed to open it. The tension in the room shifted. Even Victor's lawyer fell silent. What did you find? Elena asked. Popescu held up his tablet, displaying an image that made everyone crowd forward. Inside the scroll case had been a document unlike anything they'd expected. Not crude parchment or fragile paper, but a material that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, covered in script that was both ancient and impossibly precise. The ceremonial vessel in Elena's hands suddenly felt warmer, its mechanisms aligning with an almost magnetic attraction to the image on the screen. The story her grandfather had protected was about to become much bigger than any of them had imagined. The underground spring revealed itself gradually, its sound growing from a whisper to a steady pulse as Elena and Dr. Popescu ventured deeper into the cave system. Their lights caught glimpses of worked stone, channels and conduits carved with impossible precision, guiding the water's flow through a complex network of chambers. But it was what lay at the heart of this hydraulic maze that stopped them in their tracks. A mechanism of metal and stone rose from the cave floor like a sleeping giant, its surfaces untouched by corrosion or decay. Water flowed through it in carefully controlled streams, powering what appeared to be an ancient machine. It's still working, Elena breathed, her light following the paths of flowing water. After all this time, it's still working. The mechanism's core featured a series of interlocked wheels and channels, reminiscent of the patterns on the ceremonial vessel they'd found earlier. But this was no mere ritual object. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering that seemed centuries ahead of its time. "Look at these markings," Popescu said, pointing to inscriptions along the base. "They match the script from the scroll case. This isn't just a water wheel. It's measuring something, monitoring something." Elena's equipment picked up subtle variations in temperature and pressure around the device. The water flowing through it wasn't just providing power. It was part of a larger system they were only beginning to understand. A rumble from above made them both look up. Victor's construction crews were getting closer, their heavy machinery sending vibrations through the mountain. A small cascade of dirt fell from the ceiling. "The water table," Elena said suddenly, understanding dawning. "That's why my grandfather was so worried about the development. This isn't just an archaeological site, it's part of the mountain's hydrogeological system." She pulled out her tablet, comparing the old shepherd's map with their recent surveys. The underground channels weren't random. They followed the mountain's natural aquifers, regulating and protecting the water flow that fed the valleys below. If Victor's construction disrupts this, she didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear. Centuries of carefully managed water resources could be destroyed in days. Popescu was already photographing everything, his camera clicking rapidly. "We need to document this before—" Another rumble, closer this time. A crack appeared in one of the ancient water channels, sending a spray of mist into the air. "No, no, no," Elena muttered, rushing to examine the damage. The precision of the original engineering was remarkable, each channel designed to handle specific pressures to direct water flow with maximum efficiency. But modern construction methods couldn't account for what they couldn't see. She reached for her phone, then remembered they were too deep for signals. "We have to get back up, call the Water Resources Authority, once they understand what's at." "Stake!" A deeper rumble cut her off. This time, the vibrations seemed to come from the mechanism itself. The damaged channel had disrupted the water flow, and the ancient machine was responding. Its wheels began to turn faster, adjusting to the change in pressure. "It's self-regulating," Popescu realized, watching in amazement. "The system is trying to compensate for the damage." But even as he spoke, more cracks appeared. The machine's attempts to regulate the flow were putting stress on other parts of the system. They could hear water beginning to move in new ways, seeking paths through weakened stone. Elena's mind raced. The ceremonial vessel, the scroll case, the machine, they were all connected, parts of a larger design. Her grandfather had sensed it, had tried to protect it until someone could understand the full picture. "We need to get back to the vessel," she said, already gathering her equipment. "The mechanisms inside it, they're not decorative. They're a key or a control system. The people who built this left us instructions. We just haven't learned to read them yet." They hurried back through the tunnels, their lights catching glimpses of other machines, other systems integrated into the cave's architecture. This wasn't just a settlement or a ritual site. It was a sophisticated environmental engineering project designed to last millennia. As they emerged into the main chamber, Elena's phone buzzed back to life. Dozens of missed calls and messages flashed across the screen. But it was the latest, one that made her heart stop. A photo from the hospital showing her grandfather's empty bed. The message below it was simple: "Gone to talk sense into Victor. Some things are worth more than money." Above them, the sound of heavy machinery grew closer, and the mountain trembled with the weight of approaching change. Victor Antonescu stood in his makeshift office at the construction site, staring at the encrypted stone tablet his private archaeological team had unearthed that morning. Unlike the other artifacts, this one hadn't been carefully preserved in the cave system. It had been buried outside, as if hidden in haste. The tablet's surface was covered in the same precise script they'd found inside, but with one crucial difference. Parts of it had been deliberately damaged, specific symbols carefully chiseled. Away, not by time or nature, but by human hands. "Sir," his security chief entered, looking uncomfortable. "The old shepherd, he's here." Victor didn't turn around. "Mircea should be in hospital. He's demanding to speak with you, says he knows what you're really looking for." Now Victor did turn, his carefully maintained businessman's facade cracking slightly. Through the office window, he could see Mircea standing in the morning light, leaning on his staff, looking impossibly old and unnervingly sturdy at the same time. "Show him in." Victor quickly covered the tablet with a sheet. Mircea entered slowly, his hospital gown incongruous under his traditional shepherd's coat. His eyes went immediately to the covered tablet. "Found it, did you?" the old man said quietly. "The warning they left behind?" Victor's hand tightened on his desk. "I don't know." "What you mean?" "My grandfather told me stories," Mircea continued, lowering himself carefully into a chair, "about why our family has watched these mountains for so many generations. Not for the sheep, not for the grass, but because someone had to remember." "Remember what?" "That some knowledge is too dangerous to keep, but too dangerous to destroy completely. That's what they discovered, isn't it? Your real archaeological team, the ones you had searching before all this began." Victor was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled the sheet off the tablet. "You know what this says?" "No, but I know why. It was buried outside the cave system, why those symbols were destroyed." Mircea's eyes were sharp despite his obvious pain. "The same reason you're really here, not for a ski resort. You're looking for what they found, what made them seal up their entire civilization and leave only warnings behind." A distant rumble of construction equipment filled the silence between them. Victor finally spoke, his voice different now, stripped of its polished veneer. "Do you know how much energy that water management system of theirs produces? How far ahead of our current technology it is? The mineral analysis alone. There are elements in those machines that we haven't even discovered yet. Think of the possibilities." "Think of why they buried it," Mircea countered. "Your tablet there? It's not encrypted, it's defaced. They destroyed their own knowledge piece by piece, left just enough to warn others, but not enough to replicate what they'd found." Victor leaned forward. "But they didn't destroy everything, did they? The machines still work. The principles are still there, waiting to be rediscovered. With modern technology we could—" "You sound just like them," Mircea interrupted. "My grandfather used to tell me how the stories described them. Brilliant, ambitious, certain they could control the powers they'd discovered." He gestured to the tablet. "Until something went wrong. Something that made them choose to erase centuries of advancement and seal it all away." Another rumble shook the office. Closer this time. Victor glanced at his monitors showing the construction sites. "Your granddaughter and her professor think they're protecting history. They don't understand what's really at stake." "No," Mircea agreed, struggling to his feet. "They don't. Because I haven't told them yet. I wanted to talk to you first. To see if you could be reasoned with." He moved toward the door, each step careful but determined. "Now I know you can't be. You're not leaving this site," Victor said, pressing a button on his desk. "Security would be there in moments. I already have." Mircea's voice carried the weight of centuries. "Elena has the vessel, Popescu has the scroll case, and I have something far more important, the knowledge passed down through generations of shepherds, not the technology, not the power, but the reason it was hidden." He turned at the door, looking suddenly less like a frail old man and more like the guardian he truly was. "You want to know what's written on that tablet? I'll tell you the part they didn't erase. The part every shepherd's child learns before they can walk. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." Security arrived to find Victor alone in his office, the tablet gleaming dully on his desk, its damaged surface reflecting questions that should perhaps remain unanswered. The guardian statues emerged from the darkness like sentinels frozen in time, their metallic surfaces catching the archaeological team's lights with an almost liquid gleam. 8 figures, each 3 meters tall, arranged in a perfect octagon. Around what appeared to be a central control chamber, their faces were neither human nor divine, more like abstract representations of natural forces, wind, water, earth, and others less easily defined. Elena stood before the Wind Guardian, her tablet recording unprecedented material readings. "The alloy composition is impossible," she muttered, adjusting her sensors. "These shouldn't even be standing after all this time, let alone maintaining structural integrity." Dr. Popescu was examining the base of another statue, where complex mechanisms disappeared into the cave floor. "They're not just decorative. Look at these connections. They're part of the same system as the water mechanism. Some kind of monitoring stations, perhaps?" A quiet voice behind them made them both jump. They called them the Watchers. Mircea stood in the chamber entrance, looking exhausted but determined. Elena rushed to help him, but he waved her off. "Bunik, you should be in the hospital, and Victor knows what he needs to know," Mircea said, his eyes fixed on the statues. "But there are things only our family was trusted to remember, the stories passed down generation to generation about why these guardians were placed here." He moved slowly into the chamber, touching each statue with familiar reverence. "They're not guards in the way you think. They don't protect against intruders. They protect against what's deeper in the mountain, what the ancients found and wished they hadn't." The chamber hummed with subtle energy, water flowing through hidden channels beneath their feet. Each statue seemed to resonate at a different frequency, creating a harmony that was felt more than heard. "The scroll case," Elena said, suddenly. "The material inside, it's the same composition as these statues, isn't it?" Mircea nodded. "The final record, written in a substance that would outlast any natural material. Insurance that the warning would survive, even if everything else crumbled to dust." A distant explosion made the chamber tremble. Victor's construction crews, drawing ever closer. But this time the statues responded, subtle movements barely perceptible as they adjusted their positions. The harmony changed, becoming something more urgent. "They're still active," Popescu breathed, checking his instruments, "still monitoring whatever it is they were designed to monitor." "The ancients found something in these mountains," Mircea said, his voice heavy with inherited knowledge. "Something that promised unlimited power, unlimited knowledge, but it came with a price they didn't understand until it was almost too late." He gestured to the statues. "This chamber isn't just a warning, it's a containment system. And Victor's machines are threatening its stability." Elena's tablet beeped with an incoming message. Security camera feeds showed more of Victor's private archaeological team arriving, equipped with heavy drilling gear and what looked suspiciously like military-grade scanning equipment. "He's not going to stop," she realized. "Even knowing the danger, he'll keep pushing until he finds what he's looking for. Then we need to show him," Mircea said. "Show him what the ancients saw, what made them choose to bury their entire civilization rather than risk releasing it into the world." The chamber's harmony shifted again, the statues responding to another tremor from above. Elena noticed how the mechanisms at their bases aligned with the ceremonial vessel they'd found earlier. The same interlocking patterns, the same precise engineering. "The vessel," she said. "It's not just a key, is it? It's part of this chamber, part of the containment system." Mircea smiled faintly. "Now you understand why I waited so long to reveal any of this. Why our family has watched these mountains for generations. Some doors must stay closed, some knowledge must remain buried, not because we aren't ready for it, but because we're too ready, too eager to grasp power without understanding its cost." Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. Dust rained from above, and the statue's harmony became a warning chord. Through the tunnel entrance, they could hear Victor's team approaching, their equipment echoing off the ancient walls. Elena looked at her grandfather, seeing not a stubborn old shepherd, but a link in an unbroken chain of guardians stretching back through centuries. "What do we do?" Mircea straightened, suddenly seeming younger, stronger. "We show them everything. The statues, the warnings, the price of unchecked ambition. Sometimes the only way to stop someone from opening a door is to show them what lies behind it." The guardian statues hummed in agreement, their ancient vigil about to face its greatest test. The memory crystal activated with a soft hum that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. It rose from its housing in the central pedestal, suspended between the guardian statues, its crystalline structure catching the light in impossible ways. Within its depths, images began to form, not projected, but somehow emerging from the crystal itself. Elena, Mircea, and Dr. Popescu stood transfixed as the first images coalesced. Victor and his team had arrived moments before, their drilling, equipment forgotten, as the crystal began its ancient testimony. The chamber's harmony shifted, the guardian statues responding to the crystal's awakening. "It's some kind of recording device," Popescu whispered, his scientific skepticism warring with what his eyes were telling him. "But the technology, it's beyond anything we've ever—" "Be quiet," Mircea said softly. "Watch, listen. This is what they left for us to find." The crystal's depths showed a civilization at its peak, cities that blended seamlessly with mountain landscapes, machines that drew power from the earth itself without depleting it, knowledge that bridged the gap between science and nature. But as the images continued, something else emerged, a discovery, a source of power deep within the mountains, something that promised to elevate their civilization beyond all limits. "The readings are off the scale," one of Victor's scientists muttered, holding up a device that was starting to spark and malfunction. "The crystal's generating some kind of quantum field." The images shifted, showing laboratories, experiments, successes that seemed miraculous. But then, failure. Not just failure, catastrophe. The crystal showed scenes of power unleashed, of natural laws unwinding, of reality itself beginning to fray at the edges where they had pulled too hard at its threads. They found a way to manipulate the fundamental forces, Elena realized, her voice shaking. Not just gravity or electromagnetism, but the deep structure of reality itself, and it started to cascade out of control. The crystal's testimony continued, showing the civilization's desperate race against time. The construction of the guardian statues, the water management system, the encoded warnings, all part of a vast containment mechanism. Not to keep people out, but to keep something in. Something they had awakened in their pursuit of ultimate knowledge. Victor stepped forward, his face illuminated by the crystal's inner light. "Do you understand what this means? They found the key to unlimited power, unlimited energy. With our modern technology, we could control it, harness it." "You fool," Mircea's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "You're seeing what they achieved, but not what it cost them. Look deeper." The crystal responded to his words, the images shifting again. Now they saw the civilization's final days, their decision to bury their achievements, to seal away their discoveries, to sacrifice generations of progress to protect the future. The guardian statues were set in place, powered by a system so sophisticated it could maintain itself for millennia, watching, containing, preventing the power they had unleashed from spreading. "They didn't just hide their knowledge," Elena said, understanding finally dawning. "They found something that should have remained hidden, something that, once awakened, could never be completely put back to sleep. So they built all this," she gestured to the chamber, the statues, the water systems, "to keep it dormant." The crystal pulsed, its final images taking shape. A map of the mountain, showing what lay in its deepest reaches. Not minerals or resources, but a kind of geometric pattern, a structure that existed in more dimensions than the human mind could comprehend. The source of the power they had found, and the reason it had to remain contained. "My God," Popescu breathed, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. It's some kind of quantum fracture, a weak point in the fabric of reality itself. They didn't create it, they found it, and when they tried to tap into it, it started to spread, Mircea finished. Like a crack in glass, growing, weakening, the structure of everything around it. That's why the water system, why the Guardians. They're not just machines, they're maintaining a kind of resonance field, keeping the fracture stable, dormant. Victor's face had lost its confident smile, replaced by something closer to fear. But with proper containment, proper research, a violent tremor cut him off, stronger than any before. Warning harmonies erupted from the Guardian statues. On Elena's tablet, readings from the water management system showed critical disruptions. "Your construction," she said, checking the data. "The vibrations, the drilling. You've already damaged part of the containment field. The resonance is becoming unstable." The memory crystal flared brightly, its images accelerating, showing the final warning the ancients had left. Once destabilized, the fracture could not be contained again. Their entire civilization, at the height of its power and knowledge, had barely managed to stop it the first time. Another tremor rocked the chamber. Cracks appeared in the ancient stone, and the Guardian statue's harmony became a discordant warning. The crystal's light pulsed urgently, showing one last image. The fail-safe protocol the ancients had prepared, if all else failed. "Elena," Mircea said quietly, "the ceremonial vessel. Now you know what it's really for." She nodded, understanding at last. The vessel wasn't a key to unlock the ancient power. It was a key to seal it away forever if the containment field failed. A last resort that would bury everything so deeply that no one would ever find it again. Victor's security team raised their weapons, but Eleanor was already moving, the vessel in her hands. The choice the ancients had faced now fell to her: preserve the knowledge and risk everything, or sacrifice discovery to protect the future. The crystal's light filled the chamber one last time, its ancient message clear. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, but they can be buried so deeply that no one will find them again. The ancient warning system awoke with a sound like a mountain groaning in its sleep. Deep within the cave network, centuries-old mechanisms stirred to life, responding to the growing instability. Crystalline sensors embedded in the walls began to pulse with an urgent red light, their surfaces etched with the same precise script found throughout the complex. "The containment field is failing," Elena called out, her hands flying over the ceremonial vessel's intricate controls. The vessel had transformed in her grip, its decorative outer layer sliding away to reveal a sophisticated control interface. "These readings, the fracture is becoming active." Victor's security team had backed away from the memory crystal's pedestal, their weapons useless against the forces now stirring in the mountain's depths. The crystal itself had darkened, but periodic pulses of light still rippled through its structure, each one corresponding to a new tremor in the cave system. "The construction crews," Popescu shouted over the growing noise. "They're still working above. The vibrations—" "Get them out," Victor ordered, his face pale in the pulsing light. "Get everyone out, now!" His security chief rushed to comply, barking orders into a radio. Mircea stood before the Guardian statues, his weathered hand resting on the Wind Guardian's base. The statue's harmony had changed to a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through bone and stone alike. "They're trying to compensate," he said, reading patterns his family had watched for generations. "But the damage to the water system has weakened their ability to maintain the field." Another tremor, stronger than before. Dust and small rocks showered from the ceiling. On Elena's tablet, sensor readings from throughout the cave system painted a frightening picture. The ancient containment protocols were failing cascade, each breach leading to new instabilities. "The ancients left a procedure," Elena said, her fingers tracing patterns on the vessel that matched the Guardian's script. "A way to reinforce the containment field, but She broke off as her tablet displayed new data. No, no, that's not possible. What is it? Victor demanded, crossing to look at her screen. The fracture? It's not just becoming active, it's evolving, adapting to the containment measures, like it's learning. The warning system's cry rose in pitch. Along the walls, the crystalline sensors began to shatter one by one, overwhelmed by whatever they were detecting. The guardian statue's harmony became more urgent, their mechanisms moving with increasing speed as they tried to maintain the failing field. Mircea's voice cut through the chaos. Elena, the map, the old shepherd's map. What do you see? She pulled out the ancient parchment, its surface now gleaming with previously invisible markings that resonated with the warning system's energy. These patterns, they're not showing passages, they're showing nodes in the containment field, points where the system can be reinforced or collapsed, Mircea said quietly. If the field can't be stabilized, the ancients left a final option, a way to bring down the entire cave system, sealing the fracture beneath millions of tons of rock. Victor stepped forward. You can't be serious. The historical value alone will mean nothing if that thing breaks free. Mircea cut him off. Look at your own senses. Look at what's happening to reality itself around the fracture point. He was right. The air near the memory crystals pedestal had begun to shimmer, light bending in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. Small objects, dust, pebbles, fragments of the broken sensors were beginning to move in defiance of gravity, swirling in complex patterns that suggested geometries that shouldn't exist. The warning system's cry reached a fever pitch. On the walls, ancient script began to glow, revealing messages hidden for millennia. Final instructions, last resorts, the accumulated knowledge of a civilization distilled into one crucial choice. Elena's hands tightened on the ceremonial vessel. We have minutes, maybe less, once the field fails completely. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Above them, they could hear the sound of panic as Victor's crews evacuated, fleeing the increasingly unstable mountain. The guardian statue's harmony had become a warning siren, their mechanisms straining against forces they were never meant to contain alone. The memory crystal pulsed one final time, showing a vision of what would happen if they failed. A cascade of unreality spreading outward from the mountain, consuming everything in its path as the fracture widened, reality itself unraveling like a poorly woven cloth. Elena looked at her grandfather, saw in his eyes the weight of generations of guardianship. The vessel in her hands grew warm, its mechanisms aligning with the failing containment field, waiting for the command that would seal away not just knowledge, but the very thing that knowledge had uncovered. The choice the ancients had faced now fell to her as the mountain trembled on the brink of catastrophe. The defensive mechanisms emerged from hidden recesses in the chamber walls, ancient machinery awakening at Elena's command through the ceremonial vessel. Metal strips that seemed to flow like liquid stretched across gaps, forming new patterns, new configurations. The guardian statue's bases rotated, revealing complex arrays of crystalline structures that began to pulse in synchronization with the vessel's controls. The ancients built redundancies, Elena explained, her voice tight, with concentration as she worked with the vessel's interface. Multiple layers of containment, each one designed to activate if the others failed. This is the last line of defense before... She didn't need to finish. They all knew what the final option entailed, the complete collapse of the cave system, burying everything beneath the mountain itself. The water system, Popescu called out, checking readings on his tablet. The damaged sections are causing cascade failures in the containment field. But look, he pointed to where the defensive mechanisms were creating new channels, rerouting the flow of energy. The system is trying to compensate, to create new patterns of resonance. Mircea moved among the guardian statues, his shepherd's staff tapping against their bases in a rhythm that seemed to strengthen their harmony. These patterns, he said, They're like the ones our families used to mark in the soil during the spring ceremonies. We thought they were just tradition, but they were memory, muscle memory passed down through generations. Victor stood at the chamber's edge, his face illuminated by the pulsing crystalline arrays. His security team had evacuated with the construction crews, leaving him alone with his ambitions and their consequences. All this power, he murmured, all this knowledge, to just bury it. Power? Mircea's voice cracked like thunder. Look, there. He pointed to where reality itself seemed to be unraveling around the memory crystal's pedestal, space twisting in ways that made the mind recoil. That's what power unchecked looks like. That's what they found, what they spent everything to contain. The defensive mechanisms continued their transformation of the chamber. What had appeared to be simple stone walls now revealed layer upon layer of sophisticated technology, each system designed to work in harmony with the others. The ancient engineers had hidden their most advanced achievements within seemingly primitive structures, creating a defense that could survive millennia. Elena's tablet chirped a warning. The resonance patterns are stabilizing, but she studied. The readings, her face pale. The fracture is still growing. The defensive systems are only slowing it down, not stopping it. As if in response, the guardian statue's harmony shifted to a lower key, their crystalline arrays pulsing with increased urgency. The memory crystal flickered, showing brief glimpses of the ancients' final days, their desperate race to contain what they had unleashed, their ultimate sacrifice to protect the future. There's something we're missing, Elena muttered, her fingers dancing over the vessel's controls. The ancients wouldn't have left us without a way to restore full containment. All these systems working together, there has to be a key. Mircea watched his granddaughter work, seeing in her the culmination of generations of guardianship. Elena, he said softly, what does your heart tell you? Not your training, not your science. What do the mountains tell you? She paused, looking up at the guardian statues. Their faces, neither human nor divine, seemed to watch her with ancient patience. The defensive mechanisms hummed around them, waiting. The water, she said suddenly, it's not just power or cooling, it's harmony, pattern, flow. She turned to the vessel's controls with renewed purpose. We've been trying to contain the fracture with force with barriers, but that's not how water works. Water finds its own path, its own balance. Her hands moved across the vessel's surface, no longer fighting the mountain's tremors, but moving with them, like a shepherd flowing with his flock rather than trying to force it. The defensive mechanisms responded, their patterns shifting subtly. Yes, Mircea breathed, recognizing in her movements the ancient wisdom his family had preserved without fully understanding. Like the spring thaw, you don't stop it, you guide it, channel it. The guardian statue's harmony began to change, following Elena's lead. The crystalline arrays pulsed in new patterns, less rigid, more organic. Even the memory crystal seemed to respond, its light steadying, but beneath their feet the mountain's tremors continued to grow. Time was running out. The fracture's glow had become a terrible aurora, reality bending more severely around its edges. The defensive mechanisms were buying them time, but each passing moment brought them closer to the point of no return. Victor stepped forward, his face conflicted. How can I help? Elena looked up from the vessel, her expression both fierce and focused. You want to understand their power, their knowledge? Then help us do what they did. Choose to protect the future, no matter the cost. The mountain shuddered again, and the final test of the ancients' wisdom began. The master key revealed itself in the chaos, not as a physical object, but as a pattern within patterns, a harmony within harmonies. As reality buckled around the fracture point, Elena saw it emerge in the intersection of the guardian statues, resonance fields, in the flow of water through ancient channels, in the very rhythm of the mountain itself. There, She manipulated the ceremonial vessel's controls, her movements now fluid and instinctive. The defensive systems aren't separate. They're all one piece, all part of a larger pattern, like a shepherd's song echoing across valleys, becoming something more than just sound. Mircea nodded, understanding flowing between generations. The ancients didn't just build machines, they created a symphony, but their revelation came almost too late. The chamber's far wall dissolved into impossible geometries as the fracture expanded, reality peeling away like layers of an onion. Victor's remaining security team burst in, wearing protective gear and carrying what looked like advanced scanning equipment. "Sir," their leader called out, "the energy readings, they're off the charts. Corporate wants us to secure any stable artifacts before—" "No!" Victor's voice surprised them all. He stood trembling, face illuminated by the fracture's otherworldly light. "Get out! Get everyone out! Let them work!" Elena barely registered the exchange. Her consciousness spread across the defensive systems through the vessel's interface. The master key was a sequence, she realized, not of numbers or symbols, but of relationships. Each guardian statue's tone shifted slightly, creating new harmonies that rippled through the water channels and crystalline arrays. "The scroll case," she called out. "Quick, what did it show about the water patterns?" Popescu fumbled with his tablet, pulling up images of the ancient document. "Here, these sequences, they're not just flow diagrams, they're musical notation, some kind of harmonic structure." "Grandfather," Elena's voice was tight with concentration, "the old songs, the ones passed down through generations of shepherds, sing them. Now." Mircea didn't hesitate. His voice rose in the ancient melody, words that had seemed like simple herding songs, suddenly revealing their true nature. The guardian statues responded, their harmonics shifting to match the pattern hidden within the traditional tune. The defensive mechanisms began to move with new purpose, their liquid metal forms flowing into configurations that matched the scroll. Case's diagrams. The master key was revealing itself through the combination of ancient technology and inherited wisdom. But the fracture fought back. Reality twisted more violently, the very air beginning to crystallize into impossible shapes. The memory crystal pulsed warnings. The ancients had faced this moment too, had nearly lost everything before finding the right pattern. "Victor!" Elena called out, her hands dancing across the vessel's surface. "The tablet! The one you found!" Outside, what were the undamaged symbols, the ones they left intact? He pulled the tablet from his bag, its surface now glowing with the same energy that filled the chamber. Here, these sequences, they repeat like a counter-harmony? Yes. Elena's fingers moved faster. Not instructions for using the power, instructions for containing it. They left us everything we needed, hidden in plain sight. The guardian statue's song reached a crescendo, Mircea's voice weaving through their harmonies like a thread through fabric. The master key took final shape, not in any one system or pattern, but in the space between them all. A key made of relationship, of balance, of the wisdom to know when to act and when to accept limitation. Reality trembled at the threshold of catastrophe. The fracture's light had become almost blinding, its edges reaching toward them like hungry fingers. The defensive mechanisms strained against forces they were never meant to contain alone, but they weren't alone. Generations of shepherds had carried the knowledge in their songs, in their traditions, in their understanding of how to work with nature rather than against it. The ancients had built their machines not to dominate the mountain's power, but to become one with it. Elena felt the master key align, felt the moment when all the patterns, mechanical and musical, technological and traditional, finally flowed together. Through the vessel's interface, she could sense every system, every harmony, every drop of water and pulse of energy. The choice crystallized. They could try to contain the fracture with force, as Victor's corporate masters would want, preserving the possibility of harnessing its power, Or they could do what the ancients had finally understood, work with the mountain itself to seal away what should never have been found. Elena's hands moved across the vessel's controls one last time, and the wisdom of ages flowed through her fingers. The power source emerged from the chamber's floor like a living thing, ancient mechanisms revealing what the ancients had used to power their containment field. It was beautiful and terrible, a crystalline core that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process, its surface etched with fractal patterns that repeated infinitely inward. As Elena initiated the Master Key's sequence, the core responded. Energy flowed through the defensive systems, not fighting against the fracture's chaos, but working with it, channeling it, like a shepherd guiding a flood's waters rather than trying to dam them. The ancients didn't fail, because their technology wasn't advanced enough, Elena realized, watching the patterns align. They failed because they tried to control this power instead of understanding it. Mircea's voice continued its ancient melody, now merged completely with the guardian statues. Harmony. The power source pulsed in rhythm with his song, each note drawing the fracture's wild energy into new configurations. Victor stood transfixed, watching as reality itself began to heal around the fracture's edges. "All these years," he whispered, "we thought we were looking for a weapon or an energy source. But it was never about the power itself, was it?" "No," Elena answered, her hands steady on the vessel's controls. "It was about wisdom, about knowing when to let go. The power sources." Light filled the chamber, not with the fracture's chaotic energies, but with something deeper, more fundamental. Through its crystalline structure, they could see what the ancients had glimpsed, the underlying patterns of reality itself, the delicate balance that held everything together. Popescu's instruments were recording everything, though Elena knew that much of what they were seeing would never translate into mere data. Some truths could only be understood through experience, through the kind of wisdom that had been passed down through generations of mountain shepherds. The defensive mechanisms moved in perfect synchronization now, their liquid metal forms flowing like streams joining a river. The guardian statue's song reached deeper harmonics, frequencies that resonated with the mountain's own ancient rhythms. But the fracture fought back one last time. Reality twisted violently, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of space. Around them, the power source flared with dangerous intensity, its patterns beginning to destabilize. "Elena!" Mircea called out, his voice strained but unwavering. "Remember the spring thaw. Remember how the flocks move." She understood suddenly. Her hands moved across the vessel's surface, no longer trying to direct the power, but instead working with its natural flow. Like water finding its own path down a mountainside, like sheep instinctively knowing the safest route through dangerous terrain. The power source responded. Its crystalline structure shifted, aligning with the natural energies of the mountain rather than trying to impose order upon them. The fracture's chaotic emissions began to fold in upon themselves, drawn into patterns that echoed the ancient wisdom encoded in shepherd songs and traditional pathways. Victor's security team's instruments overloaded and died, one by one, unable to process what they were witnessing. But Victor himself stood rooted in place, watching as centuries of human ambition and technological advancement were humbled by something far older and deeper. "Corporate will never understand this," he said quietly. "They'll never stop trying. Do harness it, control it, then they'll never see its true power," Mircea replied, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "The power to know when to step back, when to let something remain in darkness. The chamber filled with light that wasn't light, sound that wasn't sound. The power source reached its full activation, not as a weapon or an energy supply, but as part of the mountain's own ancient processes. The guardian statue's song became something beyond harmony, beyond music, a fundamental frequency that spoke to the ordering of reality itself. Through the vessel's interface, Elena felt everything connect. The water systems, the defensive mechanisms, the crystalline arrays, all flowing together in patterns that had been written into the mountain's bones since the beginning of time. The ancients hadn't created this power. They had simply learned to work with what had always been there. The fractures, chaotic energies, surrendered to the deeper order, not conquered but gently led back to their proper place in the universe's vast dance. Reality steadied, healed, found its balance once more. As the power source's light began to fade, returning to its dormant state, Elena saw in its crystalline depths a truth the ancients had died to protect. Some forces weren't meant to be controlled or harnessed, but simply witnessed and respected. Some doors, once opened, could only be closed by accepting that they should remain closed. The chamber grew quiet, the guardian statue's song settling into a gentle harmony that would continue for centuries more. The power source sank back into its housing, its purpose, fulfilled not through dominance, but through the wisdom of knowing when to yield. The heritage protection document lay open on the hospital table beside Mircea's bed, its official seals gleaming in the morning light. Representatives from UNESCO, the Romanian Ministry of Culture, and, surprisingly, Victor's Corporation had all signed. The document established not just protection for the site, but a new framework for its guardianship, one that formally recognized the traditional role of the mountain shepherds. The old ways and the new working together, Mircea said softly, watching Elena add her signature as the site's lead archaeological curator. Just as it should be. The document's provisions were unprecedented. The cave system was designated a living heritage site, acknowledging both its historical significance and its continued role in maintaining the mountain's ecological balance. The shepherd families who had watched over it for generations were named as official custodians, their traditional knowledge finally recognized as crucial to understanding the site's true purpose. Victor had surprised them all by using his corporate influence to support the strongest possible protections. Perhaps he had seen something in that final moment with the power source, something that changed his understanding of what true power meant. Elena carefully closed the document, knowing that with these signatures, centuries of secret guardianship had transformed into a legacy that would be preserved for generations to come, not as a tourist attraction or a source of profit, but as a reminder that some wisdom was best kept in trust, protected by those who understood its true value. The memorial plaque caught the sunset's light, its bronze surface reflecting the same careful craftsmanship as the ancient artifacts it honored. Mounted at the mountain's base, where tourists and researchers would now stop to learn the site's approved history, its inscription read, "In honor of Mircea Vasile and generations of mountain shepherds who protected these peaks and their secrets. Some wisdom flows like water through time, preserved not in books, but in the hearts and songs of those who understand that knowledge without humility is more dangerous than ignorance." Elena stood with her grandfather in the gathering dusk, watching the last tour group depart. The cave system above remained sealed to all but a select few, those who, like their ancestors, understood that some things were meant to be guarded rather than exploited. "They'll never stop wondering," Mircea said, leaning on his staff as he gazed up at the familiar slopes. "Never stop trying to understand what lies beneath." "Good," Elena replied, adjusting her curator's badge. "Wonder is different from hunger. Wonder teaches us to look and learn. Hunger just makes us grasp and break." The guardian statue's harmony drifted down from above, felt more than heard, a reminder that some songs never ended. In her office, Elena kept the ceremonial vessel under lock and key, not because anyone could use it now, but because it represented something vital. The moment when humanity chose wisdom over power. As darkness settled over the mountains, grandfather and granddaughter began their descent to the village, leaving behind them a legacy that would endure not through force or technology, but through the simple wisdom of knowing when to let some mysteries remain mysterious.